And our program tonight will feature two outstanding and powerful digital resources that can really enrich and improve a birder's life. The first is Cornell Lab's Birds of the World. We'll hear a presentation about it and answer your questions before we move on to the Washington Birders dashboard. And we are delighted that Cornell Lab's Laura Kammermeier is with us tonight from Ithaca, New York, 3 hours later than us. Laura has 25 years of experience in citizen science, digital marketing, and communications. She's currently the marketing manager for Birds of the World and enjoys bringing the authoritative content in Birds of the World to a growing network of scientists, birders, nonprofits, and academic libraries around the world. Laura will give us a tour of this impressively dynamic resource and will demonstrate some of its lesser known features. And Laura, I'm happy to turn the podium over to you now.
All right, thank you. So yeah, Jennifer, and Grace, thank you for reaching out to us initially to offer this as a member benefit to everybody. I think it's a really special resource to be able to share widely with your membership. So we're so happy to work with you, and I'm happy that everyone came tonight to learn a little bit more about it. If you're already a user, I'm hoping that there's a few other tricks or some behind the scenes information that you'll learn tonight that can help you understand kind of like the breadth of the resource and how we're growing it into the future. So yes, I'll take any questions in the chat. I probably won't see that until the end, so we'll save that. Today, I basically want to show you what Birds of the World is and how it works. I'm going to give you a real quick online tour, and then I want to show you how to access it, but by the end. And I want to just sort of wrap this all in what the Cornell Lab's larger mission is, to bend the curve for birds. So thank you for that introduction, Vicki. You pretty much said it all. Again, my job is as business manager, marketing manager, is to bring it to as wide of an audience around the world as possible. So as a birder and a traveler, there's been so much that I've needed to know about birds over the years. And in the old days, before technology was so adamant, out there, it was very difficult to find this kind of information in one source, right? There was no one-stop shop to find this kind of information. So what's exciting about Birds of the World is this digital platform full of avian life histories that you can find almost everything you need for birds. So Birds of the World, what is it? It is a compendium of avian life histories for every bird in the world, and it's delivered on a digital platform. And the species accounts hold just a deep well of natural history information for birds. It is used in a lot of disciplines in a lot of different ways, pretty extensively across the spectrum of science and research, conservation, education, and birding. And a little bit about how it fits into the lab. So the lab has always had a strong belief that science and technology, when paired with highly engaged user communities, can allow us to accomplish conservation at scale across the world. So as you know, this is desperately needed. Populations are crashing, ecosystems are threatened. There's staggering population declines of birds in the last 30 years. In my lifetime, we've lost 2.9 billion birds just in the United States alone. So the story there is we're running out of time. And so resources like this, they excite me because it allows scientists and conservationists around the world to be put on the same level playing field. Nobody has to recreate the wheels of science or spend countless hours finding references in the primary literature. What we do is we summarize all that is known for a species. So the lab has approached the biodiversity crisis in many ways. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the citizen science projects that we have. And so we have Ebird, we've got Macaulay Library, and Merlin. And I want to show you how the development of these projects and the integration of these projects over the last few years has powered major growth in data, which allows us to interpret the world. And it has also enabled some of the superior features in Birds of the World that I'll demonstrate later. So Ebird was introduced more than 20 years ago, and it went from kind of a regional, national, North American project to global. We now have more than 730,000 users across the globe. And it's an online, for anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's an online checklist program that allows you to keep your life list and to track your bird sightings locally. And it has this added benefit of producing a global bird database of bird observations, right? That allows scientists to explore patterns in bird distribution and abundance. And that data is used by many scientists across the world in different ways. Moving on to the Macaulay Library. This is a world-renowned scientific archive of wildlife media. The archive allows you to either archive your own media or to explore what's there, photos, videos, and sound recordings of various wildlife. And these days, you can actually submit your bird recordings and photos to Macaulay Library via Ebird. I'll get to a little bit more about that in a minute. So the Merlin Bird Id app was launched several years ago. And what's cool about that is it's so simple. It can identify a bird with pretty good probability just by asking you 5 questions. Where was it? When was it? How big was it? What color is it? And what was the bird doing when it was observed? So we can, the probability of identifying the bird is pretty good in most habitats. And Merlin Bird Id is built on a foundation of artificial intelligence. So it works, this AI works on the massive media archives that are found in the Macaulay Library. And Merlin has been downloaded about 7 million times worldwide. And global identification packs are available for various areas, the Americas, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. So I'm getting to the point where I'm mentioning those. Ebird reached this really important milestone last year when it received its 1 billionth bird observation. So that means in Ebird now, there's data on 10,600 different species that has been submitted on 83 million checklists by more than 730,000 eBirders in every country of the world. So what this means is through these people being the eyes and ears of scientists on the ground, we're developing the power to understand how birds move on the earth through space and time. And so what can be achieved by harnessing the power of this global community? Well, that's becoming more and more clear every year. So about 5 years ago, we started integrating these projects more tightly. And so let's look at how they work now. Ebird observations are feeding high-resolution maps to both Birds of the World and Merlin. Ebird media uploads are feeding the Macaulay Library. Macaulay Library media is piped out to Birds of the World, Ebird, and the Merlin Bird Id app. And Merlin is recruiting new eBirders and new media every day. So the deep integration of these projects creates these data feedback loops that are leading to an explosive growth in use and data and multimedia. And why is that important? It's not important just because these things are getting bigger. It's important because of what they can do. But this is a sense of how big they are. The Macaulay Library now has 33 million photos and 1.2 million auto recordings. And right now, there are specially curated sets of media for more than 8,000 species. So this wouldn't have been possible without harnessing the power of this, highly engaged user global community. So again, back to the science and technology plus these engaged user communities can lead to conservation at scale. So each of these projects is functioning like a gear in a big data engine that's working to interpret the facets of a world's bird life. So Birds of the World comes in then, and it's the book of stories, if you will, that puts the information together, puts it in context. And they're telling Birds of the World, these species accounts within it are telling the authoritative life histories of every species on Earth. And Birds of the World brings together this deep scholarly content from 4 celebrated works of ornithology with millions of observations from Ebird and multimedia from the Macaulay Library into this single platform where you can explore comprehensive life histories. So those 4 celebrated texts that I mentioned, include the original Birds of North America and Neotropical Birds. And these were existing online resources that the lab managed. And the American Ornithological Society was a key partner in the development of this content. And it included contributions from nearly 2,000 scientific authors. So again, together we have about 1,500 different species. And this gave us in-depth content for these species in North America and neotropics. And the depth of the treatments within those really set a gold standard for us in terms of what we want to achieve on every Birds of the World species account. So to that, we added the Handbook of Birds of the World. We acquired the digital content from a publisher in Europe called Lynx Editions. And this used to exist in a 17-volume set that took up a lot of real estate on the shelf. So it was a brilliant, brilliant guide. And we took the digital content. Well, Lynx originally took the print and then put it online, and they managed it for quite some time. We acquired it 2 years ago. And then we expanded this collection of scholarly content to every bird in the world, taking us from 15,000 to 10,000. Now, because this content originally had to fit on a printed page, a lot of these are somewhat shorter accounts, but they have a solid foundation for scientific content, no doubt. But we're taking them and trying to give them the Birds of North America treatment, trying to build those up into a more solid treatment to meet that gold standard that we have. And we have teams in place to do that. So finally, the fourth text that we added was content from a book called Bird Families of the World. It was also published by Lynx Editions and written by scientists from the lab. So over the course of 9 months, our technical and editorial teams merged all this content, changed the HBW taxonomy from IOC to Clements and for every bird name, and designed and created a new digital platform to deliver the content. So what's neat about the digital platform is that it's a content management system that's based upon on a taxonomic infrastructure. So that means that every year when Ebird and Clements puts out their new taxonomy, this content management platform will respond gracefully to those annual taxonomic updates. So after we merged that all together, about a year later, Birds of the World took flight on March 4th, 2020. So we're just now going to meet our second anniversary. And we now have 25,000 people have access to Birds of the World across 123 countries. So we are also available in more than 500 research universities, agencies, and nonprofits, and especially bird clubs as well. We sustain the project by offering it as an online subscription service so that we may provide it to the largest possible number of users in areas of the world that cannot afford such resources. So we thank everyone who does purchase a subscription in North America, because it does allow other people in other regions of the world to get it for free. So there's many scientists, students, and community educators in rural Amazon, for example, that have come to us asking for what we call a digital access scholarship. And so the bedrock of Birds of the World is its 10,824 species accounts. It's one for every bird in the world, of course. And people like it because it's their primary source of information. They trust the information to be based on sound science. Each one includes these in-depth authoritative life histories. And so if you're the kind of person that loves having this reliable, comprehensive information at your fingertips, Birds of the World will give you a lot of information. Each account can cover up to 70 different articles covering all aspects of life history. And that includes everything that you see here. Appearance, including molts and plumages, details about breeding and behavior, sounds and vocal behaviors, distribution and abundance, including our eBird science and trends maps, subspecies information, similar species information, and lots more. So this kind of content can really help you expand your knowledge of birds. It includes dynamic range maps, again from eBird, but also some from BirdLife for other regions of the world and some other sources. It includes these innovative science and trends maps. And what is that? eBird is putting out these putting out new maps that give us a window into seasonal abundance and migration patterns. So if you look at this, this moving map in the middle, it's showing us the pattern of a black-throated blue warbler migration from the Caribbean up all the way through the eastern US. And there's, so a lot of these are being incorporated from eBird into Birds of the World. And while you can get some of these map products for free in eBird, the Birds of the World takes it a step further because our scientists are providing context and interpretation of the results. So each account is also infused with curated media galleries from McCullough Library. And the media assets are specially selected to represent the full life cycle of the species. So it illustrates molts, plumages, sounds. So you're going to see information for both the male and the female, the adults and juveniles, and regional plumage variations. So it's very helpful when you see a bird that looks like a species, but not quite. And then you could learn about whether it's a juvenile or an adult. It's very helpful because we do give these specially curated sets that go pretty deep into these variations. But they also are given authoritative captions that are written by our science team. So again, this gives you what Birds of the World is giving you is this curated scientific information that interprets the information for you. Each account also includes a full color scientific illustration. We have these for almost every single species and subspecies. And where there are gaps, we're working on them to get those drawings made. And of course, each color plate is aligned in the same profile position so that you can carefully make comparisons across species and families. Each account also shows the global IUCN conservation status, and you could learn more about the conservation status by going to the conservation and management section. And if you happen to do some research or working as a student, you can look at the priorities for future research and see if it fits your interests. So I mentioned the Bird Families of the World book. All of that information is translated into 249 different species accounts. So here's an example of the Acceptibidae. I can't say it very well. And what it provides is the global map, the global distribution of that family, as well as a color plate of each species. The number of genera, the number of species, and if you click on any one of those, any one of those genera, then you can go deeper, and then eventually you could get all the way to the species account for the individuals within that family. So again, it's a great way to look at similarities among species and just appreciate the avian diversity. So every account is comprehensively referenced. In fact, our Golden Eagle account has more than 700 different references. So we really have tens of thousands of references inside Birds of the World. I think the entire resource is more than 100,000 pages itself. So like somebody said, it saves countless hours pulling together these references and papers. It's good to have information in one place. And what's nice too, if you see that little yellow box, you can just hover over one of the blue linked references, and then it calls up this box that gives the entire citation right there. It's what we call inline referencing. So like all of our projects, Birds of the World is hosted by this engaged author community. These are experts in their field who contribute their time and expertise to make sure that this critical resource reflects the most current understanding of all that's known about the species. So if there's any authors in the room, please do say hi. I would love to meet you. And of course, to be a complete and current reflection, though, our work is ongoing and it's never done. And we release about 4 to 6 newly revised accounts every week. And these revisions could be a full revision, or it could be as simple as a taxonomic update, or adding a new papers, or maybe one of the authors did do some more contextualizing or developed some more interpretations of the Ebird science map. So usually, if you're interested in going and knowing what was done most recently, all you need to do is sign in, and on the home page you can see something called latest updates or latest account updates. And when you click on any one of those, you can see any one of the recent species. You could see revision notes right here that tell you who was involved with it and what content that they modified. So you might be wondering how we can sustain a project as massive as this. It's definitely a challenge, but what we're doing now is building international teams, and we're growing content. We have our lab-based team of science editors, small tech team, a very small business team. And right now, and of course, there's the worldwide author community too, of those 2,000 plus authors. But we're also building a team of associate editors, and these are people who are regional experts. It's an international team. They're either experts in a particular discipline, such as molts or plumages, or they're regional contacts that can help build an author community in a certain area, say Thailand, for example. So right now we have at least 30 different associate editors who are working to help pipe the content, edit the content from authors in that region. And so they're providing the regional expertise that we desperately need. And they're just really able to help us with this content funnel, as we call it. We're also developing regional content partnerships, because regional partners, this is from the lab perspective in general, regional partners really share our mission to engage and grow communities of people who are advocates for birds. And they're essential to our ability to generate the quantity of data that we need to power Macaulay Library, Sound ID, Ebird, all of this data. And they're also essential to our data quality goals, right? Because leadership within the birding community offers expertise in monitoring. So when it comes to our content partnerships for Birds of the World, how it works is in exchange for giving their members access to Birds of the World, the regional partners are engaging their local experts to write and review species accounts. So there's a great example here with Bird Count India. They are using the full suite of Cornell tools in order to achieve their mission of conservation. They have a really large number of engaged birders. And and also their participation in India has exploded over the last 10 years. And recently they created a team of 25 academic authors to update species accounts in Birds of the World, and they're doing a fantastic job delivering on that content as well. So in exchange, we provide open access to their registered users in India. And what's great about this is through their partnership, we really have some mutual benefit here. India has now produced actionable data and reports to conduct its science and to better conserve birds in its habitats. So we're learning how to extend that model to other regions and to develop more successful partnerships in regions of the world where we don't have the context yet, and we need to build more expertise in order to make Birds of the World reflect the appropriate expertise that it needs to for every bird in the world. So when we believe that when shared globally, authoritative bird information could move humans to care more about birds. It can inspire new collaborations and advance bird conservation in science. So we're hoping it makes a difference. We do hear from our users some really exciting stories. One person is using it to model the impact of marine oil spills and to plan local oil spill response strategies. Another uses it to help plan and schedule multi-million-dollar construction projects and uses it to protect and conserve avian populations. The Veracruz River of Raptors project, they're using Birds of the World to plan monitoring and habitat and enhancement. And one of the a rescue operation for raptors that brings in 800 raptors per year uses it to educate and train their staff members and to care for the birds. So there's a lot of ways that it's used across the globe, and we believe in getting it out there as much as possible. And we hope it's useful to you, obviously, as birders, as researchers, as conservationists. I'm sure there's a little bit of each of you in here. So I hope in summary, I've given you a sense of what Birds of the World is and its capacity to help you learn more about birds and how you can get the most out of it. But let's go take a tour online. All right. Okay, do you see black-throated blue warbler here?
Yes, we do.
Great, okay. So this is actually, I'm gonna go to the homepage first. So when you go to birdsoftheworld.org, you can see the webpage here. And of course, you can click any species into the search bar. There's a cool little surprise me button, which is one of those lesser known features. Probably not a lot of people look at it, but on the homepage, it's here. But then when you go to any species account, you can find it here. Okay, and it just picks up a random species. And I know people that can do this 50 times a row in the morning. So yeah, so this is the latest updates that I pointed out to you before. And here is a news area. We don't publish a lot of news yet, but we might as our staff capacity gains, and if people want to see it, we'll definitely do more. There's some help like FAQs and information on the about pages at the bottom. So you want to check out this occasionally. There's something called the key to scientific names. So if you've ever wondered about the origin of a species name, of a scientific name, then you might want to go here, right? So, well, Cyanocyta cristata, that's the blue jay. And when you go here, it'll give you all the history about how that bird was named and how it changed through time. And that's information provided by James A. Jobling, who's a British man who is just a scholar on bird names. And he just really gracefully wanted his information out there. And he worked with us to get this online. So we're very grateful to him. And let me show you too how you can find that. Let's go to our snowy owls, since they seem to be a big hit. Beautiful image here. Of course, you can scroll through some of the best photos again, and these will give you the regional differences or the plumage differences in sexes and age. And towards the end, you will get a video and a sound recording. So that is our media set. That's what we call the specially curated set that's coming out of Macaulay Library. So if anyone uses Ebird to upload media, if it's a really sharp image that kind of meets the standards for Birds of the World, you never know, it could find its way here. So again, if you click on this little I next to the scientific name, this is where the James Jobling information comes up, the key to scientific names. So you can get to it two ways, either from a species page or from the about pages. Here are various names that this species is known by across the world. And I don't know if anyone here is more comfortable with another language, but there are a preferences section here where you can go and change the language of the common names. It doesn't change the text language, but it does allow you to search for snowy owl in a different language. And this preference works on both your both eBird and Birds of the World. And I think it works on Merlin too. Yeah, I'm sure it does. So so check that out if you happen to be a Spanish speaker or anything else. And I believe this should still work. If you're an eBirder, So you're going to be accessing this through a special page, which I'll get to in a second. I believe this should still work. If you're logged in as an eBirder, you should see this little check mark right here. It shows whether you've seen, photographed, or audio or took audio recordings of this bird. So we call it an eBird badge, a blue eBird badge. So I've seen the snowy owl, but I have never I didn't upload a photograph, so it doesn't show for me. But if I had used, uploaded a photograph via eBird, then it would show here as well. So that's just kind of fun to, some people are motivated that way in order to say, yes, I've got the full suite of media on this species, and they want to make sure that they've seen it. And also helps you remember whether you've seen some of the more obscure species. Like, I've traveled to several countries and I have forgotten some of the smaller birds. I don't know every bird that I've seen. So I can go here and I can surf and I'll be like, oh, okay, I did see that before. So again, here's all of our content, in-depth content here, the references here. And I want to show you, if you go to the Strigidae family, right, this is where you can see all of the Strigidae owls. And it also goes off to the right. You can scroll through all of these. And then take that all the way down to the species. Now, I think I wanted to show you black-throated blue warbler because I wanted to show you some of the what a distribution map looks like. So these are the original eBird maps. And again, I showed you the moving map before. Excuse me, excuse me for coughing. So yes, so this is the eBird science and trend map with relative abundance written here. All right. So that's how you navigate around primarily. And I want to point something out. I'm sure you were given instructions on how to access Birds of the World, but in case you haven't tried it yet or you're not really sure, I want to show you what you can do. You go to the bottom of any page in the footer, and you can click on Special Member Access. This especially works if you've missed the direct way. You can remember it just by going to the Special Member Access page, and that applies to you. Go to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology logo and follow this special link. Okay, and this brings you to the page that you should bookmark. Okay, if you bookmark this page, then you can come here again and click Other Organizations, and then head off to the Washington Ornithological Society. At that point, you'll be asked for your username and your password. Click sign in, and then you're in. All right. So with that, I think I'm ready for any questions that you might have. And we'll take it from there. Really appreciate you guys again, just, providing this as a member benefit. Not everybody does that. There's very few organizations that do. So I appreciate you doing that, and I think you guys will have a great time with it.
Well, Laura, I'll speak on behalf of everybody for that excellent tour. I've used eBird, or Birds of the World, since it opened and have loved it. And it's so much, there's so much more than I realized.
Yeah.
And Elaine, I'm hoping if you are looking at the chat that you might be able to help us with the questions that have been asked.
Yes, ma'am. I'm all set. Greg Harrington mentioned that he only speaks and reads English, and I'm curious if information was available in other languages, and I think we got a little bit. Is there any further for non-English speakers for us?
Right, so mostly it's just the common name. I believe more parts of Merlin have been translated, into different languages. But again, if you go to either eBird or Birds of the World, sign in and go to the preferences, you can then change the common names. So then all of these names will be written in your preferred language in Spanish, okay? And then when you click on any one of them though, the content will be in English for Birds of the World.
I wish I could run over there and get you a glass of water, Laura.
I know, I do have some here, so.
Okay. One of our board members, Dave Kreft, asked, what are the copyright issues for using Birds of the World for quoting text, using images and maps, etc., to incorporate into general articles, making presentations to the public and things like that?
Right. I mean, you can source the information at any time, and we make it easy because you get a recommended citation, or, you know, for a general reference, you could say as seen in Birds of the World. So there's two ways to, you can do a general reference to Birds of the World, or you can do the recommended citation that gives the actual author of this particular account the credit.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Laura, have you ever seen a Vox's swift?
I have not.
You know why?
Why?
Because they're only over here on the west.
Ah, yeah. I
And
wonder. Well, maybe I have.
I wanted to give a little shout out kudo to Larry Schwitters, SCHWITTERS, who you see, he and his grandson Drew, as you see there, are the most recent updaters for the Vox's swift.
Well, excellent.
Yay.
There you go. I actually did see one at some point in my life, but it's one of those birds that I wouldn't know unless I went deeper into my eBird. But it's great to be able to put these two together.
I think we need someone like Matt to tell us who else is an author from our community here. I think Martin Muller might be on for Pied-billed Grebe somewhere in the, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, another author. Did he author the count?
That's right.
Nice, nice. And now, are these authors here today?
Sadly, no, they're working.
Okay.
I have a question from
Tell them we say hello and
Miranda.
thank you.
Here we go. Look at there. Oh my
Let me-
gosh, Martin tells a fabulous story about meeting Robert Storer way back and how that gentleman fostered his ability to move forward in birding. And I mean, it's just part of that whole hierarchy of generosity in birding.
Oh, that's
Great
wonderful.
story.
I want to point out too that there is an about the authors section where you can learn more about them.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And there is one other feature that I forgot to mention, which is one of my favorite features, and it's pretty key. It's called the Explore Taxonomy. So if you click on the Explore Taxonomy, you can see you start out with every bird in the world, right? All 10,800 species, right? But you can use this filter right here to drop down and do Washington, okay? And now we only have the birds of Washington. So if you want to explore the, you know, the ducks of Washington, or, you know, here we have the grebes. This is a more direct way in, and I'm sure this tool will be improved over the years. But you know, this is the way you can do it, because I know it's a real key. We all wondered what's nearby, what's there for us.
That's fabulous. Here's a question from Miranda Maxwell. Laura, can you give a comparison of Birds of the World Families book versus All the Birds in the World book, both by links, and how these compare to the digital Bird of the World's content? Boy, that's a big question.
Yeah, well, I haven't had the new All the Birds of the World book in my hands by links, but from what little I know, and please speak up if everyone knows it better, but I believe that the accounts are more like real short summaries in All the Birds of the World, because they did have to fit everything in a single volume. So it's a brilliant book, so beautifully illustrated. But our family accounts, again, let's take a look at one. Here's another little feature. You can drop this down and then you can search by text instead of images. So Falconiformes, Falconidae. So here we have identification, habitat, diet and foraging, breeding, conservation status, and systematic history. We have revision history because there are authors coming and going a bit on some of these accounts. And if it was written in 1998, we try to work with that author to rewrite the account, but sometimes we can't get in touch with them or they're not interested. And so there's some evolution of the authors. But yeah, so these go into more detail when possible. This is much more information than you could find there.
We have some really good questions. I'm aware we're probably running a little short, but could you mention whether Birds of the World deals with hybrids between species in a special way? It's just built into the narrative, right?
I think you're exactly right. I think it's built into the narrative. It doesn't bring them out more. We talk about subspecies, right? But if there's a hybridization, it doesn't get a special treatment, but it's part of the discussion when it's relevant.
Here's a very down-to-earth practical one. Fred Matson asks, if I'm placing something in Ebird, does it have to be a complete list for my data to be included?
No. So if let me think. So if you only report, is this all the birds that you saw, right? Yes
right.
or no? That's what we're talking about, right? Yeah. So let me think about that for a second. I'm less trained on the Ebird.
I can't imagine why it would make a difference. It's a matter of abundance and what's there that they're trying to ask, but not, did you really see let me pick out one of these birds.
Right.
A caracara. Did you just see a caracara in Union Bay?
I think it's more about looking at the whole population at a time. And so yes, they'll take that species for sure, but I don't think that it sort of gives you some information in the background about what the population is doing in the absence or presence of the local population of birds.
One of our viewers has asked if, I believe she's asking, do you use full Ebird or Ebird of the Pacific Northwest? And either way, Laura, it's going to go into the same database. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's really only one Ebird database.
Right.
So,
at the very bottom of the entire Ebird thing, there is a way of submitting information or reaching out to someone. So someone has asked if they didn't find what they're looking for, can they look for something more? Can they ask for something more from Ebird? Yeah.
Question.
Is there somebody that could get help?
Suggestion. If there's information I can't find in Birds of the World, is there a way to submit a query? Is that the question that?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so there's a contact us.
Yes.
Form right at the bottom.
Correct.
So feel free to write that, and the business team, all two of us, will respond, and we'll forward that to editors as necessary.
All two of you.
All two of us.
For the entire world.
Exactly.
That's breathtaking.
The editorial team has a publishing list and schedule, right? So if the changes that you'd like to see aren't made immediately, they are preserved officially in the background, and we will get to those as soon as we can. As soon as we're building up this team of associate editors and more authors to make it all happen.
Fabulous.
These are great questions. Wow.
I think we may have really exhausted. Perhaps we can pose these to you by email, but it's even though people can go to bed anytime they want, it is 7:50. What do you say, Vicki? Do you want some more questions? Are you?
Well, I'm thinking it's 10:50 Laura's time.
Yeah.
And if she's exhausted, I'm not surprised. This has been a very, very rich information download. And I would like to thank you very much for the quality of the download. It was excellent. And if we do get some other questions that we think are relevant, we've got your email address.
Absolutely.
And we'll know how to be in touch. And we're very grateful to you for staying up so late and making this so successful for our viewers.
Good. Well, I hope you all enjoy it. And if there's anything more I can do for you all, just let me know. And Randy, I'm excited I probably won't watch it tonight, but I am excited to look at your video to learn about how you've used these tools. And I think it's just another example of, when we're all working together to collect this data in the field, it all goes somewhere and it all matters. What you're doing matters. So it's so much fun for us as individuals to watch birds and to put these sightings in eBird and put our media in the Macaulay Library, but it matters too. We're doing great things behind the scenes with it, and I hope that we've kind of shown you a little bit of that.
Thank you very much, and good night.
All right, thank you all. Good night.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay, so it's time to transition to the second part of our program. And again, as I said, it's another outstanding and totally useful resource that's available online. And I'm talking about the Washington Birders Dashboard that went live in 2015. And Randy Robinson created the dashboard. He's a retired computer programmer with skills, abilities, and imagination that some of us cannot even conceive of. Information about his professional background and how he came to create the dashboard. And while we're focusing on Washington, he has made it global. Anyway, information about Randy is available in the most recent WOS newsletter, number 195, which is available at the WOS website. And I encourage you to look it up if you have not seen it. I thought it was very interesting reading. And when I approached Randy a couple of weeks ago and asked if he would be willing to give a presentation about the dashboard tonight, he was reluctant only because he and his wife, Jane Hadley, were going to be traveling during this time. And he wasn't sure where they would be on Monday night or what the quality of the internet would be. So he agreed to pre-record his presentation before they left, so we would be able to share it with you tonight, which is what we will do. But as it turns out, they have arrived at their destination and have good internet access. So after we play the recording, Randy is going to join us, so he will be able to respond to your questions in person. So Elaine, if you are ready to start the recording.
Fingers crossed.
Hello, everyone. My name is Randy Robinson. I am the developer of the Birders Dashboard, and I am going to be doing a demonstration of the dashboard. So let's get to it, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen with you. And here is my browser, and I am on the WOS homepage here. And this is a great place to get to the dashboard. Up here near the top, we have the navigation bar or the menu bar for the WOS homepage. And here we have a tab for birding resources. And in that tab, if we go down, there is a link to the Birders Dashboard. So I'll click on the link and up pops the dashboard. Now, there are three areas to the dashboard. Up at the top here, we have what I call the control area, which has some settings and some buttons which allow us to get to the different dashboard functions. Down below, on the left, we have a map. This is a Google map. And on the right, we have a listing area. And what shows up in this listing area varies with each function. So let's go back up here and take a closer look at the control area. The top line here says eBird sightings from the last 14 days. Now you'll notice that this 14 is part of a drop down. And so we can set this to anywhere from 1 to 30 days, with the default being 14. So I'll leave it here at the default. So this means that all of the data we see from eBird will be from the last 14 days. The second line here says choose a county. And this is set to the default, which is all of Washington. This is another drop down. And if we click here, we can see that all the counties of Washington are listed here. So if there's a particular county we want to focus on, we can click on that here and go to that county. I'm going to leave it set to the default here of all Washington state for the moment. And now we come to the controls section, and we'll see that the default function is notable sightings. That means rarities. And that means in our list area over here, we have a list of all the rarities that have been reported to eBird in the last 14 days. Now, just underneath these function buttons is a line, an informational line. In this case, it just says eBird determines which sightings are notable. So let's take a look over here in the sightings list and look at a particular sighting. Now, the first thing we see is a little X here to the left of the sighting. Well, what does that X mean? We go to the top of the list and it says here, X means not yet reviewed by eBird. eBird has volunteers around the state, expert birders, who review each of these rare bird sightings. And eBird will allow information of the sighting out to the public before the sighting has been reviewed. But we mark it here with an X so that everyone knows that this sighting has yet to be accepted by eBird. Now, we'll see to the right of that little X, we've got the species, which in this case is Glaucus gull. In italics, we have the county, which is Cowlitz. And here is the location name, and this says 7th Avenue Park, Longview. Then we have the date, which is January 25th, the time, 12:05, the name of the birder who reported this, Eric Evans. And then you'll see we have a little camera icon. And that camera icon means that there's a photo of this species in the Ebird checklist. Now we have two buttons here. We have the Ebird Checklist button, and if we check on this, we'll be taken to the Ebird website, and we'll see the checklist in full, and we'll get to look at all the information that's on the checklist. And then to the right of that button is a button which says Market, and that means mark this location on the map over here on the left. So let's take a look at that right now. So I'm going to press this Market button, and here we've had a marker that's shown up on the map. Let's get that a little bit more centrally focused. And then, as I said, this is a Google map, so we can zoom in and zoom out. Down here in the right-hand corner, we have plus and minus signs for zooming in and out. And let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to have to recenter this more. Zoom in some more. And we can see that this park looks to be 7th Avenue Park, seems to be pretty much in downtown Longview, right next to the Cowlitz River. So that tells us where this sighting is. Going back to our listing over here, let's, now that we've seen exactly where this is, let's take a look at the Ebird checklist. So I'll click on that button. Here we're being taken to the Ebird website. This is the checklist. Now we're on the Ebird website, and from here we can get anywhere in Ebird, and up here you'll see the navigation bar. But this page just shows the checklist that Eric submitted, and you can see all the species that he saw at this place, Over here, it says that this is a traveling checklist. He covered 0.391 miles in 47 minutes. And over here on the right, we see here is our glaucous gull, which is our rarity or our notable sighting. And we've got a description of the gull here: large, pale, wingtips, same color as back, known sighting, picture. And here we have a picture of this gull. So let us click on this, and here we get a blow up. And this is the photo that he submitted. You can study this and decide for yourself about that species. But this is the checklist. Now the checklist opens in a separate tab from the dashboard. So here's the dashboard over here. Here's the checklist. And as we go through, we can get up several checklists and be able to hop back and forth from one to the other and still have the dashboard up and available. For the moment, I'm just going to close this tab, and I am going to go back here to our checklist again. And notice again, this is a sighting that has not yet been accepted by Ebird. So there are 14 days of sightings here for the whole state. That's a lot of sightings. I'll just try not to make you dizzy, but I'll just show you lots and lots of stuff here. And it may be that as we go through and look at these sightings, we may want to see where another sighting is. Here's a red-shouldered hawk at Nisqually. So I'm going to mark that. And we see that the map now shows us both pins. And as we go through and study this list, we may get a lot of pins on this map, a lot of markers, and decide that, you know what, it looks kind of cluttered. I'd like to erase those and start over. And so we have a thing here which says, click here to remove markers. And the button says unmark all. So I'm going to click that, and our markers are going to go away. And now we have a clean map, and we can continue with our study of the notable sightings. So there you have a brief look at notable sightings. I'm going to now look at these other functions on the list, but I'm going to do this in the context of a trip that I'd like to take. I haven't been out to the coast in a while, and I'm really interested in going to the Grays Harbor area. It's always fun to go out there in the winter. There's usually lots of stuff to see. And so I am going to change these settings up here. First of all, I think I only want to look at about 7 days worth of data for my trip. So I'm going to change the sightings up here from the duration of the sightings from 7 to 14. And you may have noticed that the list over here blinked. Well, what happened was when I changed that setting, I went and got a new list from Ebird. And this list is shorter than the previous one. It only has 7 days worth of listings. But because the most recent listings are shown first, the top of the list did not change. Now I'd like to go to Grays Harbor. I'd like to go to the Westport Ocean Shores area. So I'm going to change the focus here from all Washington down to Grays Harbor. So I click there, and now you may have noticed that the list over here blinked again. That's because now we're only showing the Grays Harbor rarities from the last 7 days. This is a much shorter list because it's only the Grays Harbor list. The list is still ordered from most recent to oldest, and it just shows the 7 days. Also, you'll notice that the map has now focused in on Grays Harbor County. Well, one thing that I'd like to do before I make my trip is look at what's going on in some of the hot spots in that area. And here we have the Ebird Hot Spots function. I'm just going to click the button for that. And what happened here is, first of all, we got some information in our information area. It says, click on a hotspot or a popular birding area for sightings, and only hotspots with recent reports are shown. So we don't show any hotspots that haven't had activity in the last 7 days. Well, let's look at a couple of those hotspots. I'll go down here on the right and I'll zoom in. And I think I'm going to start with this hotspot right here in Iucn. And I'll click on that. And we get a little information thing that pops up that says Iucn STP. And I go over here to the right in the listing area. And here we have the Iucn STP in Grace Harbor. And here we have a list of all the species that have been reported there in the last 7 days. Now, these are grouped by checklist, with the most recent checklist first. So this first checklist, the most recent, is from January 23rd at 1:45 in the afternoon, and Jason D is the birder who reported it. Again, we have a button for the Ebird checklist. We could click this and we'd be taken to the Ebird site, and we could study Jason's checklist in detail if we wanted. But for right now, what we have is just a list of the different species that he reported. Now, the next checklist is also on January 23rd, and it's from 1:30. So Art Wang was there, started his checklist 15 minutes before Jason's. Now, Art's checklist only has 4 species on it. Now, it is not the case that Art only saw 4 species. Instead, what Ebird does is, for each list, each previous checklist to the most recent, it only shows us species which weren't reported on this more recent checklist. So to see all the species that Art saw, we'd have to click on this Ebird checklist button and go study Art's checklist on the Ebird site. But rather than do that now, I think I'll just keep going, and we can see that earlier on the 23rd, there's another checklist from Heidi Erland with another list of another few species that were not reported either by Art or by Jason. And then there's a checklist from Alex Mayur on the 22nd. And on this checklist, there are quite a few species reported. But again, these are only species that were not reported by on these previous checklists. So that's how the hotspot function works. And we can, of course, go and check more of these hotspots. I think I'll blow the map up a little bit. Here it says Bottle Beach. So this is going to be the hot spot for Bottle Beach. That's always popular. And we can look here and see what species have been seen. And again, we see several checklists. And if we want, we can click on this Ebird checklist button if we want to study these in more detail. And of course, we could check on as many of these hotspots as we'd like, but I think for my purposes, we'll just stop right there. Now, another thing you can do is, we've seen with the notable sightings, we can get all of the rarities, but we may be interested in birds that are not rarities, that are nonetheless still interesting to us. And so this next function is look for a species. And if we click on that button, we get some more information down here in this area. It says, list includes only species reported in the last 7 days. And then we've got a drop-down list, and this list has all of those species that were reported. So let's take a look at this list I don't know what's interesting to you, but red-necked grebe, let's just see what we get when we click on red-necked grebe. Well, we see a bunch of markers on the map. And over here on the right, we see some location names. And the location name tells us the date of the sighting and the count for how many red-necked grebes were reported on this checklist. So let's say we peruse through this and we're interested in, well, we'll just do the top one, West Haven State Park. If we click on the location here, notice this turns green and the marker down here turns green. So we know that this marker is the West Haven State Park marker. Our little information line says click on markers to see sightings at each location. We can do that. And here we see all the sightings that were seen at West Haven State Park. Notice that the species that we selected, the red-necked grebe, shows up in bold. And we're looking at Jeffrey Bryant's checklist from the 24th. But just as with the hotspots, we get all of the checklists that were reported in the last 7 days. And these previous checklists show species that were not seen on the most recent checklist. So this works just like the hotspots list of species. Now, notice that while we're looking at the species here, we have lost our list of the locations corresponding to these markers. Well, if we want to get back to that list of locations, up at the top it says, click here to restore list of locations for this species. There is a button here that says restore list. We'll click on that, and here we are back to our list of locations again. So with this look for a species function, we can look at all the species that were reported in Grays Harbor, and we can focus in on those species that are of interest to us, regardless of whether they are rarities. Now, one of the things that I like to do when I go to this Westport Ocean Shores area is sometimes I like to go to this north part of Pacific County. And that includes Tokeland, South Bend, Bay Center. That's one of my favorite birding areas. But to go down there and check all those places and do it any justice, it usually takes an extra day. So I want to decide whether it's worth my while on this particular trip to try to go down and hit this North Pacific County area. And up here in the functions, right after look for a species, there's a function called choose any location. And what this function does is it lets us focus in on a particular area on the map. So I'm going to click on that. And what this information line says here is click anywhere on the map to see sightings within 10 kilometers. So this 10 kilometers is part of a drop down, and we can specify 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, or 25 kilometers. So we're asking Ebird to give us all the sightings that show up in a circle of radius of 10 kilometers wherever we drop our marker. Now I'm going to leave the width of the radius of the circle here at the default of 10, and I've practiced this because this is a favorite area of mine, and I am going to drop my marker right here, and over here we see what suddenly popped up is a list of species. And these are all, again, these are all the species that have shown up within 10 kilometers of this blue marker. Now let's choose something that there might be a lot of. Let's try song sparrow. We click, oh, not so many, just one that's in Tokeland. Let's try red-winged blackbird. Here we see there are a couple now in Tokeland, Bay Center. Here's our redneck grebe. Just for fun, let's look at our redneck grebe. And there's just one location here, which is in Tokeland. But I think you can get the idea that when we click on the species here, we get markers in this area about where that species is. And so by studying this species list, we can decide whether it really makes sense to take an extra day to go down here and hit this area. Now, it says up here, click on markers to see species at each location. I'm going to do that. And this is our now familiar looking list of species, grouped again by checklist with the most recent checklist first. You'll see this is for Tokeland Marina. And Terry Martine was there on the 24th. And notice that there's no redneck grebe on her list. But here we go to Randy Hill, who was there on the 21st, and redneck grebe is on his list. So it has the same pattern here. On the 24th, Terry saw these species, and Randy Hill saw these species, which are not on Terry's list, but Randy may have seen some of these species as well. And again, if we want to see exactly what Terry saw or Randy saw, we can click on the Ebird Checklist button. And again, we've lost our list of species here, but to restore that list, we go back to the top, we find the button that says Restore List, we click on that, and we get our list of species back. Now, one thing to notice, I've done this without changing the county up here. So eBird lets us do this particular function, choose any location, anywhere on the map. In fact, we could do it anywhere on the world, and we're not restricted to the county that's chosen here. So that's pretty handy for this trip in particular. Also, it says here, click here to choose a new location. And so we can click here, things get reset to blank. And let's just for fun say, maybe I want to go down here to this area of Iucn and Long Beach Peninsula. And so I can put a marker there and I can see everything that's going on in that area. And so by using this function of choose any location, I can just poke around in these different smaller sections of the map just to see what's going on. All right, so that's choose any location. Our final function is called recent checklists, and we're still in Grays Harbor up here. I'll just move the map up there manually, get us back in Grays Harbor. And I'm going to take a look at recent checklists. And Ebird is working. Ebird is thinking. Ah, there we go. It's finally given up the goods. Now, over here, we have a similar type of listing, except this time instead of a species, we have a birder. So the first checklist on the list. And again, these are in chronological order, with the most recent being first. And this is Chris Drivdahl, Grays Harbor. And this is an exact location and the date and the time. And we have our same buttons here. We could click here and take a look at this checklist on the eBird site. We could also mark it on the map by clicking here. And we have just, again, a pretty long list of sightings. Now, unlike the other functions, this listing checklist function is not bound by the number of days. Instead, it's bound by the number of lists. And eBird will give us approximately 200 checklists at one time. And so this is Grays Harbor. It's fairly heavily birded. We'll go check. The first list is on the 25th. And I'm going to just scroll all the way to the bottom. Don't get dizzy, please. And down here at the bottom, we see that the last checklist, the oldest one in this list, is 10 January. So we have about 15 days worth of checklists here. If we were to do this for all Washington, we would not even get 1 day's worth of checklists, because we have that 200 checklist limit. And on most days, there are a few hundred checklists are submitted in Washington state. So depending on the county that you've chosen, you may just get part of a day or a day or two's worth of checklists, or you may get 2 or 3 weeks worth. It all depends. One last thing is, this has an interesting thing. If we're interested in going back in time, again, I told you this is not limited by date. We can look at a much earlier checklist. I'm going to go back in time all the way back to May of 2021, May 8th. I've chosen May 8th, 2021. I'm going to submit that date, and eBird is going to think and think and think and try to decide whether I've been a good boy and whether I can look at these checklists. So it is thinking, and it's decided, yep, I'm going to let him see the list. So here we go. Notice this is a different list. Mary Huff is the first one. And we'll jump down to the date, and it says 8 May 2021. And then we'll go down all the way to the bottom. And the oldest checklist is also 8 May 2021, 5:55 in the morning. So Rebecca Hausman was the early bird that got the early birds, I guess. She's the early birder that got the early birds. Okay, so that's kind of a fun function if you just want to go poke around in history and see what checklists have been submitted. So that's the basic overview of the functionality of the dashboard. I also want to point out that there are different versions of the dashboard. What we're looking at here is what I call the full screen version, which is appropriate for desktops or maybe your iPad, laptops, something where you've got a pretty good screen to look at. I also do a version which is for the phone. Let me see if I can find that. I'm going to now share this, this iPhone simulator. And here we have the Birder's dashboard for the phone. This works on Google and iPhone. And you can see that it's quite a bit different look, but we have some of the same buttons. Here's our list of counties. It's a drop down. So in the case of the iPhone, it shows up down below here. And then we've got our functions as buttons, notable sightings, hotspots, etc. Also, though, we have up at the list some navigation buttons. This screen is too small to get our different areas on one screen. So it's broken up in 3 different ones. This is the home, I call it the home screen. It's our control area, excuse me. We also have a button for list. We go here. I've done the, this is the recent checklist that I've done. And here's Mary Huff again. This was done on the 23rd. So these checklists date from them. You can see those checklists. This is our list. And let's mark this. Well, I'll first show you. We can go to the map. There's our map. I'll go back to the list. We'll mark it. And there we see Mary's checklist marked on our map. We can go back to the list. We can go back to home and choose a different function. So this is what the dashboard looks like on a phone. Now, how do you get to these different versions? I'm going to go back to the desktop version to show you. Up here on the navigation bar, there's a tab for versions. And I'll click here. And now I've shown you the desktop version, the full screen version, and the phone version for the Washington State version of Birders Dashboard. There are 2 other regional areas for dashboards for 2 other regional areas. One is the world. I have a version of the dashboard that works for the world, and there's both a full screen version and a mobile version, and there are links to those here. There's also a dashboard for the US and Canada, and we have the full screen version for desktops, etc. That's here, and we have the phone version, and that's here. And again, the phone version works on both Android and iPhones. So that again was on this version tab. We click here and we can get to all the different versions of the dashboard. All right, I'm going to stop here. I hope that you've found that interesting. I really encourage you to take a look at this on your own. It's a website, a web application. Nothing is downloaded to your device. There are no cookies that are deposited on your device. There's no security risk whatever. And you can just poke around. You don't have to sign up. There's no membership required. Just go ahead and play with this and see what you think. Again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to sit through this. And I'd like to thank WOS and especially Vicki and Elaine for giving me the opportunity to do this. Thank you.
Elaine, again, are you willing to field the questions for us or load them up? I see that Randy has joined us and is available to answer questions if you would like to pose some to him.
Well, I'm going to tell you there are very few questions because it was crystal clear, but there's a whole bunch of, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal, amazing, kudos, testimonials from people who use it already. Matt Bartels, who's our greatest guinea pig, said, I just didn't really even know about bird-net yet. And so, we're all going to go, I wrote in the chat, we're all going to go safely international birding thanks to Randy, because some of us aren't quite ready to go really internationally yet.
So were there any questions that were posed?
I don't see anything that I would call a question. There's a couple of diagnoses about that not being a glaucous gull, which we realize it's in the hands of the eBirder, not Randy. If anyone has a question, I guess you could even unmute and say it, but I don't see any questions. That's a tribute to clear communication.
Amen. Well,
I put in, you could call this a question, it's not really, I wrote, is there another living soul who could have constructed this instrument? You could put a question mark after that.
Well, it's beyond my imagination how he did it, and not only did it for Washington, but did it for the world.
I see one, John Houghton has written, how do I get my phone? I guess he means iPhone. I don't know what kind of phone he's got. Go to Europe. How do I get it to go to Europe? I don't know if there's any chance of a demo from Randy.
No, I'm traveling and I'm away from all of my tools, so there's no opportunity for me to do a demo. But if what's meant by the question is how do you get to see what's going on in Europe via the dashboard, if you click on that versions tab on the navigation bar that I showed in the demo, that's the navigation bar is at the top, and the leftmost tab is versions. There's a link to it. So just go to that on your phone and click on it, and it will show up. Now, one thing that will happen is if you just go to the link for the dashboard in your phone, you may see a button pop up that's where the dashboard detects that you have a small screen, and it says to go to the small screen version, click this button. And so you can just do that. And then on the, once you get to the dashboard page or the dashboard screen, you can save that to your home screen on your phone. And again, in that version, in that document that has the links to the different versions, there are some instructions for how to do that on an iPhone and on a Google phone. So I hope that answers the question.
What a resource. This is just remarkable. Thank you so much for creating this recording for us and for joining us tonight so that you could be here to respond. We are very, very grateful to you. And I think at this point we can say the meeting is wrapping up. I really hope people will join us on March 7, when we'll have Mike Denny and his colleague Daniel Biggs here talking to us about the deserts of the Pacific Northwest. And I wish you a good month. Good night.
Thank you, Vicki.